Hello, and thank you for joining the talk about the year of the C2 with Chase, Dardaman, and myself. So to begin, just a little intro. My name is Quentin Rhoads Herrera, or Paragon Sec on Twitter. I've been doing pen testing for quite a while, exploit development and exploit research, and a bunch of other stuff that really isn't important or pertaining to this. Chase?
My name is Chase or Charles Dardaman. I've been doing red teaming for a little over 2 years now. Love breaking software because I absolutely hate computers, and I like to develop tools for hacking.
So the first thing we really want to cover is what is a C2, because quite often we run against red and blue teamers who either have a separate definition or they just don't know what it is altogether. So in basic terms, the command and control system is used to obtain persistence on compromised machines. So let's say you use the newest exploit out there, zero login, and you gain DA and you want to then compromise or maintain access to all those compromised machines. You would use something like a command and control infrastructure to maintain that access across the board, as well as being able to execute commands one time against many machines, maintain looted data or anything that you've pulled off, all in one central location. So it makes red teaming and post-exploitation a little easier. So red teams are the most widely used teams that use C2s. They're mostly used, as I said, for post-exploitation, mostly for red team engagements that include like phishing or any type of more complex threat actor emulations. However, it can be done in internal pen tests where you're just checking for vulnerabilities on servers. It is helpful in that exercise. They, like I said, really enable us to maintain access to multiple machines instead of having to have shells beaconing back to like Netcat or anything else in a more less organized fashion. It also helps us build advanced techniques to bypass tools such as Carbon Black, Silence, or any EDR AV out there, and bypass blue team defenses that have been put in place. However, that doesn't mean blue teams can't use it, and we really encourage blue teams to actually test out all of the command and control systems that they can against their defenses. You can learn several things as a blue teamer using a C2, such as the techniques that red teams are using to bypass tool sets or logging. You can see common themes such as reading into memory, and you can also just understand more in depth about how a red teamer will go about using a C2 in order to maintain access to your infrastructure. This level of knowledge will help you further defend yourself by either enhancing the tool sets you already have or by building custom, logs or alerts that can help you detect a compromise or a red teamer that's within the infrastructure.
So there are lots of C2s out there right now. C2 Matrix themselves have probably about 50-ish now, if I remember correctly. So the ones you would have heard of, like COBALT Strike or Covenant or Empire and all, or even Merlin, and all of those have been out there for some time and are continuing development today. So some of the two biggest ones we're going to go over here. One is PSEMPIRE. So you guys have probably heard of it because it was written by SpectreOps, I think 9 or 10 years ago now. And their goal was basically to show that PowerShell was not secure, right? There was no monitoring on it. There was nothing that people were doing to watch it, and that it could be easily utilized for malicious purposes. So they wrote it. It was CLI based only, written in PowerShell. The agents were all PowerShell. The backend was mostly Python 2. And they deprecated it about last year. And since then, PSEMPIRE took it over. They ported it over to Python 3, which was good. And they started adding a UI because they realized that CLI-based only C2s are kind of getting old at this point. So as you can see here, this is basically what their CLI looked like. If you guys have ever used Metasploit or any hacking CLI-based tool, it's kind of going to look the same, right? And then this is what their new UI looks like. So you're allowed to run commands. It's supposed to make it a little easier to interpret the data you are, especially as you get campaigns with larger amounts of targets. You really need help keeping up with it. So the other big one is Cobalt Strike. So Cobalt Strike is paid for right now. It costs about $3,000. It was created 8 years ago, and pretty much the de facto for professional teams, or even APTs use it. Cracked versions are out there for crimeware, all sorts of stuff. So it's built in Java with agents based in C. It does have collaboration features, so it has a team server with a UI, and then it's mainly Windows focused. There's not a whole lot. I think they do a little Linux, but they're pretty much focused on Windows, and they're very good at it. So one thing that Cobalt Strike does is pretty neat, is it allows you to visualize what your campaign looks like. So if you'll see the firewall there, that's your egress point, and basically it's showing that as you move into the environment, it allows you to keep track of how everything's connected to each other, because sometimes excessive firewalls really just don't let you out of the environment. So you need to be creative with how you get your data back out.
So there was some problems with C2s that Chase and I realized when we first started looking into either purchasing a C2, using an open source, or building our own, right? One of the biggest problems that we found was the lack of flexibility due to them being developed in a very specific language, right? So PowerShell Empire as the example, as the open source de facto at the time, it was all PowerShell based agents for the most part. Modules and et cetera were all built around one language, right? So if you weren't fluent in that language, or you had some deficiencies in knowledge or lack of knowledge, then you had to really get up to speed quickly in order to expand upon that C2, in order to make it really usable for you and your team. Because that's another thing we had to think about, is not everyone on a red team is going to have the same knowledge base, right? Some of us are going to be really good at PowerShell, some Python, and other languages, right? So the lack of flexibility really caused us to question what direction we were going to go. The next problem is we know that most organizations are Windows primarily, right? However, Red Hat, CentOS is within most environments. Mac or Darwin devices are within enterprises. Even mobile is within enterprise infrastructures. So we wanted something that could be used across different platforms, right? We didn't want to have a C2 that operated only in Windows and then find another C2 or another way managing compromised Linux devices. That splinter really caused us to have some added overhead or excessive work that we really had to overcome. So that was another issue that we found with what was currently out there at the time that we were investigating this. Another part is our red team today, Team Aries, is roughly about 12 people, different varying skill levels, different interactions with C2s and other tool sets and other commands, other operating systems. So we wanted something that was multi-user platform, right? Something that could be used by anybody on the team. They can see what others are doing. There was logging capabilities, and they can communicate and collaborate within that C2. So that was really imperative for us, especially as we hire younger or newer analysts within the red team who we want to catch up to speed and teach how to become an effective red teamer. We wanted the ability to add comments or suggestions on how they should approach maybe that next step within the C2. And that really goes into the difficulty of new analysts being able to use C2s in the real world scenarios, right? CLI base is kind of the de facto standard for a lot of tools red teamers have. And it's partly because it's really easy to write a CLI base, right? You don't have to know JavaScript. You don't have to know UI development. So with new beginners entering the world of C2s, they don't really visualize the workflow or the process of an engagement leveraging C2. So we wanted the ability to have a C2 with a UI, and at the time there wasn't any really out there except for paid tools like Cobalt Strike. So after all of the analysis of the problems that we were facing and where we wanted to actually go, Chase and I decided to go about building our own, right? One that would effectively solve the problems that we were facing and at the same time teach us how to develop. So we developed this tool called Demo C2, which we launched this year. The primary reasons outside of just solving some of those problems, is to learn, right? If you want to learn any concept within blue or red team or anything in the technical world, the best way to do it is just to get hands-on and do it. And really the last reason to develop it is because I'm cheap. I didn't want to spend money on Cobalt Strike or another tool when I could have leveraged that funds to train our analysts to become better. And so really with all solving our issues, learning how C2s operate, learning these different operating systems, and because I'm cheap, came about us developing Deimos C2. So some of the biggest benefits that we got from this right off the bat after many months upon months of development is we built it in a way that agents and modules can be built in any language, right? The server itself is expecting communications in a certain fashion in JSON, right? However, that allows us to build an agent in C, or if we wanted to build it in Python, technically we could. Modules are the same way. We can build them in any type of operating or any type of language. Since the backend is built in Golang and our agents currently are in Golang, we support all operating systems to include mobile. This was really big for us because one of the problems was the lack of cross OS compatibility, and Golang just natively has that capability. Multi-user support, Deimos C2 with its UI capabilities, with its commenting features, has multi-user support. Multiple users can interact with agents at the same time. They can see what others have done. There's logging across the entire platform. And also archiving, replaying. One of the problems I get from a lot of clients that come to us is asking us, what did you do? And can we retest or redo something? Or maybe the assessment is really long and you need to bring down the server, or the server just went down. You could actually back up the entire server or archive it. We call it endgame is the feature. And you can pass it back up in called replay function, which will stand up the database, all compiled binaries, all logs back in place, all comments back in place, allowing it to be like as if it never ended, right? The only difference is obviously the agents on the victim servers would no longer be communicating backwards. You would have to find your way back within that environment. And lastly, it's going to be open source forever. We're never planning on making it sponsorware or a closed pro version of it. So one of the biggest design choices was for the GUI was to make it easy to visualize the workflow of a command and control infrastructure. We wanted to make it easy for new users to navigate C2. Dark theme, obviously, because we all live in basements for the most part, and bright screens hurt us. Multiple language for our non-English speakers, right? We understand that not everybody who's in red team or who's in pen testing speaks English. So we wanted localization so that it can be easy to use for those who aren't speaking English, who don't speak English. And just overall, we wanted the entire front end easy for people to use, bridging that gap between complexity of actually running a red team engagement with the C2 to making it easier. And we really wanted to call out kind of the collaboration, right? That's a really big piece. So in this example, I'm running some commands. We're taking some data and we ran tasks. We want to see what's going on there. And we want to paste it in there. So if another user goes in, they can see who ran that data, who copied it. We can leave notes for each other, allowing collaboration across. So if Chase decided to log into that same agent, he could see that I've already printed out some of the tasks. Maybe I found some passwords in clear text. I didn't want to pull them down, so I put it in the comments section. Or maybe I just want to leave a nice YouTube link to Rick Astley's video for Chase.
So part of the design choices we went with for the server was we wanted it to be very lightweight. So not everybody who's getting into red teaming or even in a red team has the resources needed to run really heavy tools. So we wanted to be able to run this on a Raspberry Pi, and it does currently run on a Raspberry Pi. You could probably get about 100 agents connected to it before it would start to slow down at all. We also want to make it web-based, so everyone's tired of Electron apps taking up all their RAM, so we decided not to go with that. Instead, we just went with a straight web server-based server. That way, everyone can reach it. You can reach it on your phone, and without having to really need to install anything, and keep the dependencies down across the board.
So going backwards a little bit, this actually started after, before we analyzed all the weaknesses within C2s, Chase and I were on an engagement where we gained domain admin remotely in under an hour due to an arbitrary web shell upload for this client. And I had to look around and say, well, I didn't want to upload a shell that was on GitHub that, didn't have any password requirements. So I wanted to come up with the idea of making secure web shells. And so we went down that path first, and then we got into writing JSP, and I didn't want to do that. So we ended up writing binaries, and, Deimos became a C2, a full-fledged C2. However, we still, when we went through building out, finding out what the deficiencies with C2s are, how we are going to fix it, and our approach forward, we wanted to keep web shells because I still believe there is a really solid need for web shells within the command and control infrastructure. Main reasons really is they don't get caught, right? Most companies are not monitoring their IIS server and saying, hey, a new IIS or ASPX file was uploaded, right? And so you can actually interact with those web shells through Deimos C2. We do have PHP. It's a little bit broken right now, but we're still trying to get it working for both Windows and Linux. The other really big thing about our web shells is you can pivot easily from having a web shell into a full-blown Deimos C2 Golang agent, either through Quick or whatever method. By just deploying it through the web shell, it would delete the web shell. Now you would have a full agent on the actual victim machine, allowing you to move through and start pivoting into the internal network.
So some of the design choices for our agents were that we really wanted them to run on any OS. So one of the reasons we went with Golang is the cross-compiling made it super easy for us to do that. We wanted it to be difficult to find as well. And so luckily with us, Golang makes it kind of hard to analyze. Not many AVs really work on that right now. And we wanted to make it so that it would work over multiple different listener types. So one of the things we implemented specifically was Quick. Quick is a UDP HTTP3 protocol that most people aren't monitoring for right now, and very little tools can even catch it. So most people aren't looking for 443 UDP traffic going out, and we can operate fully over that as well. So on top of the fact that we wrote them in Golang, we actually made agents. We kind of made it like a platform, really. So you could write an agent in C. Right. So if you want to make your own custom agent, which is always the best thing to do to avoid detection, as long as you talk to us, our server, in the correct way, you can write it in anything you want. You could write it in Python, PowerShell, C#, anything you want, really. We also have modules that work with it, and those operate over JSON RPC. So as long as you write a module that can talk over JSON, then you're fine. So it allows a lot more flexibility in how we expand this and continue to avoid detections and continue to increase the capabilities of the C2.
So going into kind of agents are their own platform. During DEF CON this year, there was a great talk given about domain hiding, right? How in the past, a lot of implementations prevented us from doing domain fronting or domain hiding using TLS 1.3 and using the ESNI, or the encrypted destination, if you will, of your server. The speaker at DEF CON showed that you could effectively put an agent on a victim machine and have it look as if it came from or was talking to anything behind Cloudflare at this point, like Bitdefender in the screenshot to the left. This individual used our Deimos C2 platform to emulate this during the talk. And so we decided within 3 days to actually implement it full-fledged within Deimos. So currently, all of our HTTPS agents currently support domain hiding, which, again, all it does, I mean, they did fix a little piece of it. Cloudflare did. They no longer show the SNI value because per the RFC for TLS 1.3, you don't need to show that. But still, the IP of destination still appears to be Bitdefender, as you can see on the left. But truthfully, the communications is actually going to the Deimos C2 server. So if you were a blue teamer looking at this, you wouldn't be able to actually clearly see the malicious traffic because it would appear to be going to a trusted host like Bitdefender or Okta. This just goes to show the real flexibility of our agents and how, as Chase said, it's really its own platform.
So one of the design choices that we really wanted to incorporate was the fact that just like in every engagement, you kind of work your way in. So you get in from external, you pivot internally, and you work towards whatever your objective is. A lot of times the basic objective is domain admin. So as you work towards that, you're going to run through different network segments. And so pivoting through those and pivoting in general is required in order to really be able to hit all of your goals while continuing to use the C2. So currently we support pivoting over TCP. We plan to expand that. We're probably going to add SMB, even though it's caught by most Fortune 500 companies these days, as well as quick lateral pivoting as well. And so the goal of that is just to increase it so you have more options of pivoting as they start to catch them, and it makes companies go, hey, I need to monitor more lateral east-west movement, not just north-south. The agents also stay asynchronous. So the benefit of that, while it might take a little bit longer for your command to run if you're 10 chains deep in your for the agent you want to run, the benefit is it's not a constant connection, right? So it's always going to be that slow. Every minute I check in, every however long you want, every day even. So it's going to take a lot longer. It's going to be quieter, harder to pick up with your network monitoring as you increase your network monitoring with the clients we go against. In addition to that, we also have more modules. They're front end, back end, in the sense that they run on the server and the agent. You can write them in any language as long as you talk over JSON. Like I said before, they work through the pivot agents. Like I said, it just takes a little bit of time as you push them down, because you're pushing full binaries down. And it's the same encryption scheme. So just because if you write a module that's sending some sensitive data back, like you're dumping LSAS or something like that, you don't want that to be sent in the clear. Well, don't worry, all that data is still being sent back through the agent channels. So you don't have to write any communication channels at all on the way back out.
So some of the things that we want to, do moving forward with Damo C2 is we want to really support mobile, and the biggest reason is we want to show the weaknesses within the iOS or Android platform security in terms of detections, right? We found in the past, or others have found in the past, operators or malicious actors with HTTP agents in the clear running on mobile devices that don't get caught for an extended amount of time, and we know enterprises are fully supporting mobile platforms. So we really wanted to take this in the direction eventually of showing that mobile support, similar to how PowerShell Empire showed how PowerShell needed further detections. We plan on doing the same for mobile with the C2. So we want more modules, agents in different languages, really just to show that it's possible and how it works, because part of believing in what we say is actually showing. So we do plan on writing some agents in different languages like C# or just C itself. More web shells, PHP, JSP, because I know not everything runs on IIS, and PHP is a heavily used web language out there. And we also want to get better at obfuscation and evasion of AVs, EDRs, and other defensive tools, loggings. We really want to make our tools harder to detect so that the blue team works harder to catch us, further making them more secure, and us work harder in order to make our C2 fully work.
Speaking of mobile agents, one of the things we wanted to do was to show, and we're working on Android currently, in that it's very easy to Trojan APKs. So in this video, what you're going to see is a simple Hello World app, basically, and when you click it, it's going to reach back and touch our C2 and show that we have control over the phone. Currently, we support Android as binary. So if you have an exploit and you're on the phone already, you can run the binary. And that's working almost 100% at this point. And the APKs, we're working on the Trojaning of it right now. There's still some issues with it, specifically around the different ways that it's being sandboxed. But the goal is to very shortly come out with it and have a full write-up on how you can Trojan any of the APKs that you might want. We're also working on an iOS binary. That one will be after the APK comes out. We're probably not going to work on Trojaning iOS at this point, but we're going to put the binary in there pretty soon.
So as stated quite a bit during this talk, modules is a big thing for us, partly because with all C2s, it allows us to execute more complex commands or functions on multiple compromised hosts through one system. So some of the things that we've already looked at is key logging for all operating systems in a way where the key logs don't actually touch disks. They just stream over the agents and to a server side. Remote RDP, virtual console capability, similar to how Cobalt Strike has. So if you're, remotely, let's say you're compromised host in an internal infrastructure, but you're remote, you can gain remote visual access, similar to RDP over VNC or something along those lines. Memory dumping for all operating systems, define passwords running in memory for other processes like Java processes. It's commonly found. And anything else really that helps red teams succeed, right? Again, the goal being to make this as flexible as possible and as competitive to the paid products as possible. So trying to build this up to be comparable to Cobalt Strike.
One of the things we're also continuing to work on is evasion. So luckily for us, Golang provides a certain level of obfuscation and annoyance already for reversing. So over here on the right, I have a tweet from the creator of IDA Pro basically saying that they do not currently support Golang because of the way that the function returns work. So I've had some friends like Jimmy there, who's basically he had to reverse some Golang malware and has had the fun time of going down a massive rabbit hole in order to get it working. Because on a base level, Golang pretty much isn't very supported by a lot of the reversing tools out there. Ghidra doesn't bring the return functions in correctly either. So you have to know how to fix that or to really continue to go into it. So that helps us out, and as well as the size of the Golang binaries also just can be large, right? So Golang, the way it compiles, it puts everything in there together. So like your hello world's over a meg. So it makes it more annoying to, if you're not a strong reverse engineer, to really get into it and find out what it's doing. So we're going to also add some more just straight obfuscation. So Golang, when it compiles, it puts the path of everything in there. So if you don't compile with obfuscation, it's going to say there's going to be strings in there that say demo C2. And the current obfuscation is basically just randomizing the strings and things like function names and stuff to stop it from saying Demos or saying any string that's easy to find. But we would like that to make it look more legitimate. So we're currently in development of a way to make the binary basically point it at a GitHub repo that's Golang, and it's going to start copying those strings and functions and things like that in order to make it look like a legitimate binary from another company. Because like we've seen with other AVs, I remember Cylance had an issue where if you threw a bunch of known good strings at the end, it doesn't matter if it caught it before, it doesn't catch it anymore. So the goal is to make malicious behavior look more legit, and that's going to make it harder for us to be detected.
Yep. We also want to do some sandbox and VM detections. One, if you don't want to be in a VM, not have it execute, or if malware reverse engineer catches the binary, not have it detonate. Checking sandboxing, waiting until delay until it's out of the sandbox, and whatever else really helps us become better at evading detections, so that we can improve the detections. Again, everything Red Team does really is to help push defensive measures forward. And so if we can add more capabilities to bypass these detections and logging or alerting, we can hopefully help the blue teamers, the defenders, find other ways around us, so that it makes our job harder. Obviously, like I said at the beginning, this is open source and will remain constantly open source. As Chase and I are both in Navarre and we're going into Q4, we're quite busy, so we haven't added a lot to Demos since its release. However, that is the GitHub. We encourage everyone to collaborate. If you have anything that you want, add it to issues, or if you can see something in our projects that you're interested in developing, reach out to Chase or I. We're very friendly to talk to sometimes, and more than willing to answer any questions or guide you down the right path. But we really want to make this a highly competitive C2 that people want to use, competing against closed source. So to contribute, really, again, agents and modules, right? Whatever helps you succeed. It doesn't matter what language it is, or even if it helps the larger community, if it helps you write it, I'm sure somebody else will be interested in what you have. Helping expand pivoting capabilities like SMB through named pipes, even though it is detected at Fortune 40 and below companies or companies who've invested a lot into cybersecurity, it still will bypass a lot of detections in other entities. Help with obfuscation and evasion, right? If there's something that you see that we're doing wrong, reach out. Or if there's a better way of doing it, reach out, right? Again, we want to make Damos C2 really amazing as the de facto open source free C2 and rival the paid ones. There are a lot of good open source ones out there we've used as inspiration to build this, but we really look at Cobalt Strike as being the direction we want to take this, right? But instead of paid, open source. So in conclusion, we know C2s are invaluable for red and blue teams. We see breach attack simulation tools are effectively just automated C2s, and they help blue teams further. So using a C2 like Damos or any of the others is no different than using some of those paid products. It's just more manual, and the manual way is you're going to learn a lot more, right? Offensive tools do push the whole industry forward. There's a lot of argument about, okay, bad guys are going to use the tools. That may be true in most, in some cases. However, if they're open source, you can see the code, you can see how to stop it. We've already seen individuals take Damos and write some rules against it, YAR rules against it, to try to detect what we're doing. And so we're going to then turn around and try to bypass that. And it's going to be a constant battle, but at the same time, it's going to push both the red and blue team industry forward. And finally, if you want to learn something, regardless if it's C2 or if it's how to do a certain technique, just build it, right? You will learn more by doing hands-on than by reading a book or going through, and asking somebody questions. Just build it like we did with Damos. Chase and I learned a ton through this entire process. And it's definitely, opened our eyes to different avenues that we want to take in our professional careers as well as our personal hobby and learning different aspects of bypassing or writing different things. So thank you for attending this talk. You can reach out to us. Both Chase and I are part of Team Aries. That's the team's Twitter up there. Both Chase and my Twitter are right there. If you have any questions over Damos C2 or how to collaborate or contribute, feel free to reach out to us. We really, again, want to make this a great open source project that rivals Cobalt Strike and some of the other paid ones. We want to give a better open source option that can help others and make it last for many years to come. So thank you all for attending.